I would like to quickly point out that John the Mouse Video has a large selection of videos from North and South America for your viewing pleasure. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Now let's get into the cheese of the matter.
Yeah, I'm Ken Wise, and I used to do industrial development in Rochelle. I'm retired now, but and the railroad park was just one of the many railroad things that I did when I was doing industrial development. Well, I was bored one day and I was reading the newspaper, and it was 95 degrees, really a hot day. And I was reading the newspaper, and the people down here, right over here on the other side of the park, were complaining about everybody was parked in their driveway. I said, what are they doing on a 95-degree day? You know, what are these people doing? So I went down there, and here they were, cars parked all over the place. They had a picnic table. They had a burn barrel. They didn't need it that day, but they had a burn barrel for cold weather. And the thing that really got me was the pizza guy drove up, Pizza Hut. I said, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I make regular deliveries here. I said, what the heck? Kids were running all over. They had a tent out there to keep out of the sun. It was really a terrible situation. I said, where are you from? Man, they started telling me states all over the United States these people were coming from. And so I come down there every once in a while when I had a little time and interview people, where they were from and whatever, and people from foreign countries. And I said, well, how do you know about this place? Rail fans, they all knew this is a place to go see trains. And the problem at the time was that there were so many people down there that the Union Pacific Railroad decided they didn't want them that close to the railroad tracks. So they were going to put up a fence, and they were going to keep them away from the diamond and the whole thing. I said, you know, this is really ridiculous. And out in the hot sun, and, you know, no washrooms and whatever. And so I thought, you know, what we need to do really, we need to build a park. You know, we need to have a place for these people. So I dealt with the railroads in Illinois, the Department of Railroads, state of Illinois, and I called them up and I says, do you have any railroad parks in Illinois? They laughed. They said, yeah, railroad park, you gotta be kidding. And I said, well, I'm thinking about doing a railroad park for rail fans to view trains. No, that's crazy. The railroads won't let you do that. I said, wait a minute, the railroads ain't running this town, you know? And they said, wow, you gotta get permission. I says, from who? And well, they didn't know what to say about that. And I said, well, if I decide to build a railroad park, I said, I'll build a railroad park. Well, one day I'm down there interviewing, and here's a guy from Peoria. He worked for the Caterpillar. And I said, you know, I started interviewing him. I said, well, did you take the day off? Yeah, took the day off to see trains. I said, you took the day off from a good paying job at Caterpillar to see trains. Absolutely, I take all my days off and come down there and watch trains. And I said, hey, I had an idea. I was thinking of building a railroad park over here for you rail fans, place to stay. And he just glared at me and he says, nobody ever did anything for rail fans. The railroads hate us, they arrest us, they do everything. Well, I heard that story all over. The railroads, they don't even like cars, you know, they don't even want grade crossings, you know, they don't. And the people don't like trains because they blow whistles and they're always in the way. You know, it's kind of an unhappy relationship. But I was dealing with the railroads. I built a city railroad here in town. So I was used to dealing with the railroads, and they're an obnoxious bunch, really. So that you just got to treat them that way. So did I ask their permission? No. I didn't even ask the city council's permission, if you can believe it. I was working for the Economic Development Group, and I had a separate corporation, so I didn't have to use taxpayer money. So I ended up buying the property, unbeknownst to anybody, drew up a plan, and said, okay, I'm going to do this. And everybody looked at it and says, well, you know, nobody's ever done a railroad park across the United States. And, you know, the railroads don't want you around there. And I said, well, I don't care whether they want it or not. I'm going to build a railroad park. So I called a meeting of the city council, and I called a meeting of the park district, and it was a tourism bureau. And I said, okay, here's what I want to do. And I didn't ask for any money. I just said, I want to build a railroad park. And the park district says, well, we don't want any more grass to mow. And the Chamber of Commerce, that was the other entity, I said, well, we don't do tourism. I said, you ever hear of the Royal Gorge? I said, there's all kinds of things owned by Chambers of Commerce. Well, they weren't interested. Finally, the city manager just got up, picked up the print, and says the city will build it. Now, I didn't ask for any money. I'll work out the money. I just needed the city to say, okay, we'll do it, because I already own the land. So that's how it started. And the railroads, they were really mad at me because they wanted to know what was going on. I wouldn't tell them, till it was built. That's just how obnoxious I am. But I had the list of all the people that were coming here to see this. And the other thing that's interesting is across the street is we have a generating plant. Rochelle generates its own electricity. Believe it or not, those are locomotive engines generating electricity in that plant across the street. So I thought, okay, this is what you see out there is what you get. I surveyed it twice because I used every inch of the land that now the city owned it because the city had to then take it over. And I went for state grants, put in a tourism tax. Wherever you go, you pay a tourism tax. So I put in tourism, and so I got grant money from the state, and so no local money was used to build it. So this was a house. There was two houses here. The one house behind me, there was a house. I took that down. I took 40 tons of debris out of this area. It was a place where the railroads are dumping junk. That one house next door was dilapidated. This one we kept and turned it into a visitor center. So what I really wanted to do was make it for photography. I understood photography a little bit, running newspapers before I took the job of industrial development. And so if you notice that there's an overlook, when you stand on the overlook, what you got to do is your eyes have to look into the engineer's eyes. That's the height. In other words, you're on his equal. And the engineer, I said, now I want a place for kids to be able to stand up and look in the engineer's eyes. So he put benches in there. The benches are, people sit on them, but they're really put there so that the kids can stand up at the same height, look in the engineer's eyes. The worst thing about photography of locomotives is that they're 18 feet high. So you're shooting up at a weird angle. And right away, it distorts your picture, really. And invariably, if you're trying to take pictures around a railroad, you're in a deep ditch, usually. You're never in a good position. Either that or you're too high. So that's why it's designed the way it is. If you want to watch trains, you can watch trains, of course, on your laptop through Trains Magazine. There's a video camera out there. People from all over the world. I got a call one night in the middle of the night. Geez, in Australia, the guy says, "Hey, your video camera's down." So the video camera is part of it. I started looking at the history. There's an example out there of strap rail. The first railroad that went through here was strap rails. So I wanted to know what strap rail was. So I was in Washington, D.C. I went to the Smithsonian and found a scrap piece. There was only a piece about that long. And I measured it, and so you'll see an example of strap rail out there. Also, the history here is interesting, especially during the Depression. The hobos lived here. This was really a hot spot for hobos. And they lived underneath the overpasses, and they spent a lot of time in this area. And this was a hobo jungle, and there were several other hobo jungles. So the park is here for the rail fans to enjoy the park. But it's mainly for photography because there's different elevations because you want to be at different elevations for photography. And that's why it's designed the way it is. Yeah, some wanted more trees planted. You're doing a park, you got to have trees. No. The trees are going to be in the way. So that was a battle. It was one battle after another. But since I was doing it and being belligerent, that's the way it's put together. And of course I wanted washrooms, naturally, handicap accessibility. Everything is ready for handicapped. Boy, they come from all over the world. We see more people from France, at least the ones that I bumped into were from France. Canada's pretty big. The people from overseas, they're not used to such big, long trains. Trains are much shorter in Europe, so that's the thing that they're interested in. The other thing I mentioned is that the Whitcomb locomotive, this is the home of the Whitcomb. And so I got two Whitcombs here so far, one here for the kids to play on, and another one over here for people to see. So we're trying to get some history involved in the rail. But people do come from all over. I don't care where you go, any place I go in the United States, If they hear me up from Rochelle, it's, oh yeah, you got the railroad park. Well, there's rail fans all over the place. I can't believe it. What's really great is the kids. I talk about the kids standing up. If they do this, they'll blow the whistle. and we do have an ordinance in town that they can't blow the whistle, but they can do it for the kids that are. Well, we're continually buying land. As houses around the area come available, we're trying to acquire them. Got a lot of ideas to enlarge the park. It just depends on the city council and what they want to do. The tourism board, it's kind of up to them now. I'm kind of out of it. But I have a lot of ideas, a lot of things I'd like to do. Well, that was one of the ideas, was to put up a tower there, where you could go up to the top of the tower and see the whole railroad situation in this area. But you could also see it by video cameras too, so that would work that way. But yeah, I have, Del Monte used to own that facility, and at one time they were going to give it to us. I want to do a museum there too, of Whitcomb. But that hasn't got done yet. That's the history of the park. The park, a lot of people said, what are you going to charge? Well, we don't charge anything. Nothing worse than somebody always wanting money.
This small gauge turntable was used to manually change direction of the train and from one track to another. It was made on December 27th, 1904 at the Canton Foundry in Canton, Ohio. It is made of cast iron and weighs approximately 1,500 pounds. It was located in the Whitcomb building, as I pointed out here in the video. This section of building was in the beginning stages of demolition in 2007. They were taking out everything of value out of this section of the building. It was saved by a local historian and was moved to a garage at 716 Kelly Drive. And it stayed there for several years until the turntable was moved to the Railroad Park in 2017. Like most things that started in the USA, it started in George Whitcomb's own home workshop, or some would say garage. He started making mining equipment that used compressed air. That ended up making him some money and moved to a building in Chicago. He also expanded into making other things like knitting equipment. Not sure how that happened, but if you know, leave it in the comments down below. In 1888, the first electric mine locomotive in Illinois began operating in Chicago. When electric undercutting machines started hitting the coal industry, Whitcomb knew he had a problem. He knew that they would be using electric instead of compressed air. He looked at the available options that they had to move coal out of the mine. Electric locomotives that had overhead cables. That was a source of sparks that could ignite methane in the mine. Bad idea. The other was compressed air locomotives that people were making. To him, that was too large, and they also needed recharging stations throughout the mine. Whitcomb decided that he needed to do something new. He wanted to try powering it by a new fuel, the byproduct of kerosene production. It was gasoline as we know it. Cars were running off of it. Why not a locomotive? In April 1906, he had the first successful gasoline locomotive in the nation built and installed in a large central Illinois coal mine. They did not have any problems with it. They did have to rebuild the engine every 3 years. Nobody knew anything about the detonation or the octane resistance to detonation. Remember, it was just a waste product back then. It wasn't figured out until 1930 when they came up with the octane measurement. In 1907, they moved their Chicago production plants on Orleans and Ohio streets to Rochelle, Illinois. Main reason because of its large knitting customer move there. The Vassler Swiss Underwear Company from Chicago. Even back then, they were having union troubles. The first Whitcomb Locomotive Works building they had built in town was sitting on G Avenue. They built a few different gasoline test locomotives as they were building the other items. Whitcomb was trying to get a gasoline engine to survive the extremes of a coal mine. This small factory only made small locomotives, and they were only powered by gasoline. By 1912, they had outgrew their production space, so they started building a new plant on the corner of 5th Avenue and 2nd Street. This new Whitcomb factory, according to the map, reads they would move into by March 1st, 1913. The building is a reinforced concrete frame with wire glass and brick between piers. About that time, the Swiss Underwear Company moved back to Chicago. Not to worry, by the next year during World War I, most of their locomotive output of the plant were government orders. That gave them an opportunity to start making bigger and bigger locomotives. Far as I know, they were getting all their steel shipped to them from the big steel mills of Chicago. During this time, they were putting out as much steel as they could for the war effort. By 1922, they added on some more to the plant to increase its production. At this time, the first factory, it's still vacant on G Avenue. A few years later, in 1929, they had made their first diesel model. They also designed and built the largest gasoline electric locomotive that had been offered to the American Railroad at this time. The largest and most powerful model it ever constructed had a center cab, model 65 DE14. Around World War II, they had two variants, A and B. By 1946, they had produced 3,258 gasoline and 2,054 diesels, for a total of 5,312 internal combustion locomotives. Whitcomb continued to expand and progress after the war. They remained popular builders of small diesel switchers through the late 1940s. The increased volume led them to further expand their storage and shipping facilities at the Rochelle plant. 1947, they completed their warehouse with the latest in material handling equipment. For handling the steel slabs and the sheets, they used a 10-ton overhead yard crane with a warehouse for storage. The next year, they added a locomotive test building with a loading dock. Not only did they make parts that they used, but they also used Westinghouse Air Brake Company products on their locomotives. In February 1952, the Rochelle plant was closed, and the locomotive production was shifted to the Baldwin's facility in Eddystone, Pennsylvania. The last Whitcomb locomotive rolled off the line late March of 1956. This is not the end of these locomotives, as they live on around the world. Life of this diesel electric locomotive started in this building in Rochelle, Illinois in 1944. This locomotive was specially built for the government. It was built with two 6-cylinder, 6 3/4 bore with 8 3/4 stroke Buda engine. The Buda Engine Company was started in Buda, Illinois. but moved to Harvey, Illinois. I found some maps that show the buildings that the engines were built in. As you can see, they also made automobiles. Feel free to pause the video to study the layouts of the plants. This locomotive is designed so the driver can run the locomotive in the center cab with each engine on each end of the locomotive, so one could be lost in battle. Supercharged diesel engine Buda Lanova model DCS 1879 is rated at 325 horsepower at 1200 RPM. Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company supplied the two 197 amp main generators with four 970 amp traction motors. They power the 73-ton locomotive without armor, or with armor at 76 ton, that could power it to 46 miles an hour for a max speed down the track, with 775 gallons of diesel fuel. Army purchased and shipped them over to Africa and Europe during World War II. They were put ashore in France after the invasion to take supplies to the Allied forces. It was one of the locomotives that first crossed the Rhine at the Weasel. After World War II, 20 of these locomotives were sold to the Dutch railways to help them in the rebuilding efforts. Most of them were scrapped during the 60s. The rest of the locomotives were shipped back to the USA, including this one that the Lehigh Cement Company purchased back in 1947. They used it at the Iowa cement plant for about 60 years. The museum located in the Netherlands has been looking for one of these locomotives to celebrate the 75th anniversary of World War II. They wanted to restore it back to its original condition for people to see. I'm sure it will be part of the traveling museum that runs down the railway. The museum's railway has 6 towns on its line that it can stop at. They contacted the Lehigh Cement Company to see if they had the locomotive that they were looking for. They did. The locomotive had been sitting for more than 10 years, so you can imagine it accumulated a little dust. They cleaned it up for the long trip to its new home. Instead of taking the locomotive by rail, they decided to lift it onto a heavy haul truck. 2 cranes first picked up the old locomotive as the heavy haul truck positioned its trailer underneath the dangling locomotive. After it was in position, they placed it on the trailer, ready for its trip. That's just a little over 300 miles away from the port of Milwaukee. After getting to the port, it has to be loaded on the ship to make the trip to the Netherlands. One of the ship's crane lifted it aboard for the next part of the journey. The ship will make its way through the Great Lakes to the open ocean to travel to the Netherlands. Now, remember, this is not the first time that this locomotive has made this trip on a ship. When the ship got to the end of its journey, the locomotive was loaded on to a waiting truck to finish the last leg of the journey to the museum. Now, the long road to restoring it back to its original condition. As you can see, that it has a lot of work to bring it back up to the running condition. Do you think it'll last another 75 years after it gets restored? I'm sure time will tell. This Whitcomb 45-ton black gasoline-powered locomotive that was built in Rochelle, Illinois' factory. This locomotive, built for the U.S. Army, is sitting in front of the factory. You can see the building on the lower right-hand side of the picture. We will look closer into this 45-ton locomotive that sits in the park. It has a serial number of 60695 and was given the number WHPX5 by the W.F. Hall Printing Company. After it rolled out of the plant in 1946, it headed to the Chicago area, where it helped pull cars around for the once largest printing facility in the world. You might have seen their work. They helped print parts of mail-order Sears catalog volumes. They printed many catalogs and magazines of the day. Hugh Hefner grew up around the Hall printing facility in Chicago area. He had his first Playboy mansion located at 1340 North State Parkway, Chicago, Illinois. Then he started the Playboy magazine. He had them print the magazine for several years until they sold the printing company to another owner. They lost the contract, and the company went downhill until they closed the Chicago building in 1985. Hugh had a part in the American culture that even touched the New Yorker paper on January 15, 1972. It was published without caption, but you can see that you could be coming home to your own bunny. In 2005, the Western and Southern Railroad donated this black Whitcomb 45-ton locomotive to the city of Rochelle. It was put in the park on its own pad between April and August of 2005. This 1928 7-ton Whitcomb was the first locomotive in the park. It was donated by the Griffiths. This narrow gauge locomotive was built right here in Rochelle, Illinois. Whitcomb were the first ones to make explosion-proof electric mine locomotives. Back in 1914, the U.S. Bureau of Mines gave it their thumbs up after the exhaustive testing they did. More than likely, they used nickel-iron alkaline storage batteries, or during the day, it was also called the Edison batteries. A lot of overworked mules and small horses lost their jobs pulling rail cars. The Whitcomb locomotives not the only took over the mines, they also started taking over the battle trenches. Hundreds of armor-plated locomotives went to France, where they were built for hauling needed supplies up to the front lines. With their reputation for producing quality products, bigger locomotives were demanded to haul larger train cars. Largest gasoline electric locomotive switchers came online to help move cars around for the USA and overseas for the war effort. The next advancement came as diesel electrics. It revolutionized the American transportation system. After the war, more diesel electrics were employed to help rebuild. If you'd like to hear more history of the Lehigh locomotive or other videos I have done on my channel, it has been seen that big and small kids love to climb up on the locomotive and pretend to be an engineer as others watch. The term hobo, I believe, came shortly after the Civil War ended. They would sometimes travel 1,000 miles to make $1 a day harvesting wheat. Most of these young men were unmarried and English-speaking migratory workers. They were also homeless. From October 1929 to December 1941, during the Depression years, millions of these rail hoppers were not afraid of leaving their hometowns. Millions more who were afraid of leaving their hometowns stood in long soup lines for hours, 7 days a week, to get a handout. Just to make it clear, not all train hoppers were true hobos. They were glad to take almost any available work in order to pay his way. Others got the name of bum. These people avoided work in favor of that heavy drinking. Still others got a name of tramps. They were the ones that would work only when it was absolutely necessary. American hobos had their own communication to help inform fellow hobos. You'll find these markings along the railroad line. They can be located on fences, posts, sidewalks, buildings, trestles, and bridges. Some of these are warnings of what may or may not lie ahead for other travelers. Times have changed over the years, or has it? Over 150 years, we can still find American hobos running around the countryside. They are finding ways to fund their travels on YouTube. I will leave a link to Hobo Shoestring channel down below in the description. You can see in his videos he has upgraded his communication to newer technology of cell phones. In 2020, sure looks like we're having another depression on our hands. Millions of people out of work, companies are going broke, people are losing their houses. Just look around in some of these states. You have the new soup lines where people are lining up with their cars for hours to get their food. Others are camping overnight, trying to keep a spot in the unemployment line. You can see the mass migration of people fleeing into better states that'll let them work. Will we see more American hobos running the rails? I don't know if that'll happen in mass. As I travel around the USA, I see hundreds of engines sitting in rail yards, with thousands of train cars sitting at the ends of the line with nowhere to go, as the freight has dried up. As long as some of these trains are moving, the hobos will ride.
Up and down the platform, please. Okay, go to channel 2 and speak to CA Control. I'll send CPD that location. 4. For control to all Green Line operators, alternately, grad report 1086 on the platform. Operate on site with caution. Once again, all Green Line operators, alternately, got a report 1086, possible 1086 on the platform. Operate on site. 6, that's to your attention, 605. 610-4. 116, you can proceed. Control, he barely can hear off the radio. 587. Control tower 587.
Yeah, reach Congress requesting a 1040.
1040, 102.
Go to K1102 North, K1102 North, 1021.
114, northbound and Jefferson Departure Patrol. Harlem O'Hare side that person on the right of way?
There was a phone on the track. There was a phone on the track.
587.
And proceed. Yes, proceed.
At 42 to R88. 58. We're going to lower the road train. We're going to lower the scrapers on the road train. 88. 4. 88, 4. Pay attention to what trains are coming out of Cottage because no one's over there. I-42. To R48, 48. 48. 488. We're going to need to lower the scrapers on the road train. Get a hold of the yard. Road train, start with the road train, lower the scrapers. Sample. K347, all units, please stand by for an announcement. Alright, K347, all units. Firm K3, 1400 hours, the winter weather plan will be activated on all routes. Once again, the winter weather plan will be activated at 1400 hours. Please make sure you lower all sleep scrapers and prepare these sleep fighters for action tonight. All managers, please notify the control center when all the scrapers have been lowered on your trains on each route that you have. Thanks.
24K347, I'm 10-4. K524 to 188, 288, 388, 358, 258, 158, 157. Let's begin lowering these scrapers. Let me know the head car and the first one to leave the terminals with these scrapers lowered. And also the last. Four 188, 157, 158. Are we 4?
4. R45 to control, G-Nation 40, good afternoon.
The trick is back on. 45, 10-4, 10-40, 10-2, 10-4, units to next. When you get a chance, 1021 control.
Tempo control.
Ground control to Port 12, 1040, 10-2.
Thank you very much, control. Have a great day.
Control, 10-4, likewise. High Tower, requesting a 1040. 46-2.
Our 485 AM to 10-7 control. Have a good afternoon.
Rochelle, set point in 10-7, likewise.
1057 controller, I'm back to my personal.
Operator 209 to control.
Operator 209.
Control 3, clearance to select out of the Morgan Middle.
What time are you due out, 209?
Go here.
What time are you due out? About at 1403, correct? Come out at that time.
See you at the first park in the USA built just for visitors to see and film operating trains along the tracks. Opened year-round, rain or shine, 7 days a week. John the Mouse travel map is available for Google Maps. It will help plan your route to the locations of your favorite videos. It is free to use. I have the link below. Please visit the playlist tab for videos that I have sorted for you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button